I hope you'll be able to write.
Yes. Today we do the natural one.
You are live.
Okay. I think everything is good. Waiting for Lami. He said 1 minute. Contact? Flight mode? Is it on flight mode? Contact? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Honorable Halifa Sallah, the spokesperson for the coalition, will now give a statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Coalition 2016 is a tactical instrument established to effect the strategic objective of bringing about regime change in the Gambia. This has been achieved. I am now mandated by the executive committee of the coalition to inform you of our state of preparedness as we poise to participate in the April 2017 National Assembly elections. It is important to give background information on what it means to establish a coalition. People must have clear understanding of what the role of political parties are and the role of a coalition. The first chapter of the Constitution establishes the Republic and asserts that sovereignty resides in every Gambian. The sovereignty of the people is meaningless unless power is exercised by the people to determine their manner of government. That is precisely the reason why Chapter 5 of the Constitution establishes the franchise. And Section 26 empowers every Gambian to exercise their political right either to represent or be represented. And the franchise establishes the presidency and empowers the people to elect a president. Section 96 of the Constitution asserts that we have a right to establish political parties, and that is established under Section 60 of the Constitution. And that right is extended by the Elections Act, where political parties under Section 103 could go about and put their programs before the people to enable the electorate to make informed choice. And under Section 104, any Gambian has the right to belong or not to belong to one's party of choice. And under the Constitution, Section 100, there should be no restriction on the establishment of political parties. So in a genuine multi-party system, the people are free to join the political parties of their choice and contest elections on the basis of the programs of those parties. So the coalition is not preaching the abolition of political parties or their participation in any elections. In fact, it is established precisely to promote genuine multi-party contest. It is because of the absence of the atmosphere, the environment, the climate for conducting genuine multi-party contests that gave rise to the coalition. Section 48 of the Constitution used to contain a provision where no one could actually become a president of the Republic unless one has over 50% of the votes, in order to guarantee the absolute majority principle. That was amended in 2003, introducing first past the post, where one could win a presidential election by one vote. Faced with conditions which were deteriorating, that would have enabled the incumbent to find it very easy to stay in office where the opposition is divided, is what compelled the opposition to come up with the vision for electoral reform, first and foremost to promote electoral reform. That name no longer fits our present condition, because the opposition is no longer opposition. It is now the party combined together that is in office. I use the party in a loose way. It's the force combined together which now governs the country. The second objective was, in the absence of electoral reform, we should combine to have only one candidate so that the votes will not be divided. This is what gave rise to a convention and a coalition, requiring one person to stand as an independent candidate with the objective of unifying the opposition and unifying the nation by not concentrating on what divides us, and that is belonging to respective political parties and having party loyalties, or belonging to different ethno-linguistic groups and having ethnic loyalties, or belonging to regions and having regional loyalties. So in essence, the coalition reflected the spirit of the Constitution of one Gambia, one nation, one people, which makes it mandatory on the Section 60 of the Constitution that no political party should be registered on the basis of ethnic, regional, religious, and other divides. So the coalition then has started the process of building a new Gambia, hoping that with that foundation, all will claim ownership of the presidency and the executive, and all will assist the executive to attain its aim for the common good. And all political parties ultimately will take ownership of the achievements. That is what was envisaged to be the basis of the coalition and its collateral benefits. That period has passed. An executive is in place, it is governing. But the franchise also provides for a National Assembly. And under Section 100 of the Constitution, the National Assembly has the power to legislate. It is the legislative authority of the country. That National Assembly is also empowered under Section 102 to provide other services for the nation. It will approve the budgets, receive the reports of the executive, receive audit reports, and advise the president on that National Assembly has powers to establish standing committees, select committees, committees of all sorts, be it in the security domain, financial domain, human rights, health, education, all aspects of executive life, where the executive established ministries to provide services to the nation. And it could invite any authority to appear before it to do any inquiry, to be able to have facts on any matter and give its recommendations. And when it does that, it has the power of a high court. So we are not talking about an ordinary body. We are talking about a body which possesses powers to carry out oversight of how the nation is governed. All parties could contest elections. But we were faced as a coalition with the question, do we disintegrate into the separate parties and contest the elections on the basis of party affiliations? Or do we maintain the same tactic that was adopted to establish the coalition for the presidential elections? For the presidential elections, the candidate resigned from his party to stand as a candidate for all, independent coalition. The question the coalition was confronted with is simply this: should the candidates from the various parties come together and one selected among their number to stand as independent coalition in order to have a spread of independent coalition candidates throughout the country? Or do we say when one party puts here, the other party should not put there and settle the matter that way? So the question we have to address is, what will enable the coalition to win the highest number of seats? Because under the Constitution, the National Assembly requires at least simple majority to be able to pass any bill, and three-quarter majority to be able to amend the Constitution. The coalition has a legislative agenda, an agenda for constitutional reform and legal reform. The question is, if it does not have the three-quarter majority, would it be able to carry out the constitutional reforms it promises the Gambian population? This is a question that the coalition had to address. In the same vein, the executive requires support. Support in analysis of bills and their passing, international agreements and their ratification, as well as simple oversight, looking at what is being done at the level of the ministries and giving honest opinion to the executive for the objective of proper policy making. So if it does not have that support, would it be able to govern in the best of manners? So my duty is to report to you that after deliberations, lengthy deliberations, I am told to tell you that the position of the coalition, of course, two parties have reservations, and they still have reservations. But the coalition cannot withhold its position because nomination is going to take place on the 9th. And if we are to maintain the same principle, all of you are fully aware, until we were left with 6 presidential to select one among their number to be an independent coalition presidential candidate. So it means that the same principle must be applied if we are going to have coalition independent National Assembly members. We must look at the candidates that the parties wish to put as candidates and then bring them together to narrow the gap so that we end up with one candidate. The executive of the coalition has emphasized that in terms of the National Assembly, they are giving 2 criteria as the fundamental base of selection: the electability of the candidate as well as the competence of the candidate. Because without competence, we are not going to have a very strong and viable National Assembly. And consequently, our object would have failed. Because if the object is good governance, and we don't have competent National Assembly members, then our object would have failed. So it is in this regard that the coalition has decided that we cannot keep our negotiation secret, but to declare so that those who wish to continue with that policy of coalition independent candidates will begin work in earnest. It has created its own committees so that they can play supervisory role to all those who are going to participate in the process to ensure that the process is free, fair, and the selection process is acceptable to all stakeholders. But notwithstanding, just as it was during the presidential election, all do not come together at the same time to adopt the same policy. There are always decision lag on the side of certain stakeholders. So we do not want to create acrimony, confusion, by expression of frustration and derogatory remarks by people who have not adopted a position that a person supports. We must begin to understand that sovereignty resides in each of us. And when we join political parties, we are exercising our freedom of association. And when we assemble, we exercise our freedom of assembly. Every Gambian has a right to freedom of political association and should not be condemned in any way for exercising that freedom. What lies before us is a tactical issue, and to the mind of many of the coalition members, stakeholders, it is best we move together and finally attain the majority in the National Assembly, carry out the constitutional legal reforms that are necessary, build the concept of one Gambia, one nation, one people that is necessary in order to have security and peace, and create a new start for the country. And thereafter, parties now can go on a level ground to seek the mandate of the people on the basis of their programs and policies. To conclude, prior to the presidential elections, parties existed and parties were promoting their presidential candidates on the basis of their own programs and policies. However, when the discussion started for a coalition, even though political parties went about in search of a mandate from the people, but not a single party had the confidence to stand alone, because the people demanded that the parties must be together, because that's the only thing that could give them confidence that victory could be assured. So the coalition was not a matter of choice. It was a matter of necessity. It is a demand from the population. And we heeded the demand and reaped the results. So we are treading on very careful grounds. We believe that it is the same agenda that is on the ground for the National Assembly election, but we may be wrong. So it is the duty of every Gambian to start the process of interrogating what we are putting before you, because that's what happened during the presidential election until unity was effected. The coalition did what it could do. During the presidential discussion for presidential candidature, the parties, the stakeholders also did what they could do. But ultimately, it is the people who demanded, and you either join or you are abandoned by the people. So it is the people now who must speak. And from their voice, leaders will listen, because no leader wants to lose the confidence of the people or lose an election. So you say Gambia has decided. Well, we are yet to decide for the National Assembly elections. And we hope that the people will now take charge again and decide what platform will enable them to support parties to take charge of the National Assembly and shape our destiny. Without that, well, will still be living a life of guesses what will happen at the National Assembly. Unless we take charge and make sure that we put the right people in the right places, well, we'll continue to be victims of our own innocence and reap what innocence means, the inability to take control of our own lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Halifa Sallah. We now invite questions from members of the press. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Keba from report for a newspaper. Thank you very much. My name is Sheba Jekong, I report for Korea. I want to, you talked about two parties that you did not mention. Could you tell the public who these parties are? And also, do they give reasons? Do they give reasons why they don't want to appreciate this proposal, like to be part of the coalition for National Assembly?
Well, the objective of this press conference is not to tell people who did not agree. The objective is to tell people those who agreed had agreed to do. The parties, if you ask me, of course, I will tell you that it is NRP and UDP. But essentially, we're not talking about not agreeing. We are saying that it's a process of dialogue still taking place, that they have not accepted the line that the majority has actually accepted, and that is to stand as coalition independent.
But you don't know what is that they want, the reservation.
Well, I'm sure if you go to them, they will be able to give a press conference and explain their position more clearly than I would ever be able to do. Thank you very much.
My name is Mafuji Sise. I work for the Voice. It is history that many of the coalition governments never last in Africa. But would it be this sign that we are seeing? Would it be right for someone to say that this is the beginning of an end to a coalition government in the Gambia?
Well, we must distinguish coalition government and a coalition legislature. A coalition government, many times people mistake what government means because we look at it philosophically. Governments must be defined by constitution. And under the Gambian constitution, the government of the Gambia is the executive government of the country, the executive, meaning the president, vice president, and the ministers. That is the government as far as the Gambia is concerned. Well, as it stands, I'm sure that if you ask yourself the question, you will see that, well, the government, coalition government still exists. And it will certainly last for not less than 3 years. And it will last for 3 years if what is agreed upon is respected. And obviously, the government is established to last for a period. It's not established to be forever. So, yes, sometimes we use in a very romantic way of coalitions failing, etc., and their histories. But coalitions are not supposed to be political parties. They are supposed to be a combination of political parties established for a purpose. Once that purpose is served, their end should come. But in our own situation, the end should come within 3 years. Now, moving to the second phase, that is the Coalition National Assembly, well, the objective is really to create a support for the legislative program of the executive. So in that sense, the objective is to have the majority. You may belong to a different parties and be in National Assembly and still be supportive of the government. So the issue is one of tactic. What is more likely to happen? Would we be able to win more seats by going separate ways and still support the government? Or would we be able to win more seats by being coalition independent? I think that is precisely the question. For most people, the answer is that, yes, they would have liked to stand on a party ticket. But if the nation speaks and speaks with one voice that it is better for the coalition independent to stand, well, obviously, those who want to win elections and to meet the aspirations of the people will do what the nation says. So to us, we believe that no, it's not. The coalition is about. The coalition government is about to end. We believe that this is a new phase of coalition building. What the first phase.
My name is Halifa Sallah. I'm the Party Network. I'm going to hear about two things here. That there are two parties who are not going along with the coalition independent candidate. I want to know whether a coalition is going to put a candidate in all these 50 constituencies against the other two parties that are going to put up candidates, or going to have a technical alliance, leaving the other party to put a candidate in other constituencies and only on their own constituency.
Well, I don't know what is meant when one says that, well, are you going to put everywhere? Well, the issue is not against some coalition against something. That is why I have emphasized that there is still discussions going on, and you, the population, should begin to speak out, encourage, so that there is consensus building. That was the case before. Why couldn't it not triumph now? So rather than talk about something divisive, I believe what I am asked to do is to promote more conciliatory tones to facilitate unity. I'm an individual. I'm just a spokesperson. That issue, I'm sure, will be treated by the coalition, the executive.
Thank you very much. I'm Seni Marana, work with SMBC News and VOA. Thank you very much for organizing this. Mr. Sallah, my question might be about the coalition government. 2 days ago, the Minister of Interior took a bill to the National Assembly for the Assembly to amend the upper age for the position of the President, Vice President, and Superior Court judges from 65 to 70. We realized that you made an interview with a newspaper and said such move is unconstitutional. A lot of people were raising eyebrow as to why an advisor to the President on governance will come with such a statement without advising the President before that bill was taken to the Parliament. I just want to know what made that move unconstitutional. And secondly, from your statement, the coalition house is under fire. We all know it. The coalition came up with a MOU, for them to contest the last presidential election that gave overwhelming victory to you. This was a teamwork, and it was a demand from Gambians. And now, the same Gambians are demanding for you people to go together as a coalition to have a parliament that we all have been looking for, a competent parliament that will ensure checks and balances, separation of power. But from look of the things, this will not likely happen. So I just want to know, don't you think this is a betrayal of trust that Gambians have on you as coalition government leaders in terms of your disagreement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have raised two issues. We must separate a government minister from a coalition executive, that is party and state. And I believe that is what we have always advocated for, a total separation between party and state. So when we talk about Coalition 2016, that is a combination of 7 political parties and 1 independent political aspirant, plus 2 independent National Assembly members and 2 groups of activists, civil society activists. So in essence, it's a broad-based alliance. And that is not the government per se. Now, you've said being a government advisor. I have had a press conference here and have made it very clear that I am not part of the executive. I am an advisor, but not an executive advisor. An executive advisor must receive aid from a government and will be driving government vehicles, giving government telephones, and all the paraphernalia of officialdom. Well, I'm not that. It's an advisor. And an advisor cannot be with the president 24 hours every day a week. There are government ministers and ministries who carry out their functions in so many different ways. So what is important is to bear in mind that when you have the concept of open society and open government, you should not be restricted to this concept, narrow concept, that there should be no criticism, etc. Now, it's important for you to bear in mind that the bill was taken to the National Assembly. There are National Assembly members, but there was a bill to amend the Election Amendment Act. That is proper. Why is it proper? Because under Section 101 of the Constitution, a bill must be published in the Gazette for 14 days before it is introduced in the National Assembly. But if it is deemed to be an urgent matter, you can forego the 14 days and still introduce a certificate of urgency before the National Assembly, and they could still consider it. That is when you are passing ordinary bills which deals with National Assembly from that angle. That is, these are ordinary bills. But when you are dealing with the Constitution, you cannot go by way of Section 101. It has a section of its own in the Constitution, and that is Section 226. So what it says is that if you are to introduce a bill to amend the Constitution, prior to doing so, you must publish it in the Gazette for 3 months for the first reading, and then publish it again for not less than 10 days, the second publication, before introducing it in the National Assembly. So that has been made clear after it was done, and there is absolutely no doubt that government sees eye to eye with that particular position, and obviously they will be doing the rectification. But when something is in the public space, somehow you must contain that. And publication in the newspapers is a way of remedying what is wrong. And I hope you see the value of newspapers in ensuring that the public is informed of what is correct. So that bill will have to be returned to the National Assembly and will have to be published again, for the 3 months that it requires, and then 10 days again before introducing it in the National Assembly. And there is absolutely no doubt that most likely, especially if we have the majority, obviously we are all interested in the amendment anyway. So if it is just particular interest, I'm particularly interested because it will serve my purpose. But then we don't make laws for our own personal purpose. We make laws based on the common interest.
My second question.
Yeah, the second question, well, everybody is free to indict. That's an indictment. I mean, that is the right of every citizen to indict whoever is leading you. But essentially what we see is a legitimate process of dialogue within a coalition on the issue of tactics. That is very legitimate. People need to express their opinion, what they believe would be the best way to win an election. I really would not interpret it the way you have. I would simply say that you have to sell your tactics to the population. If you are already convinced that coalition independent is the way that will enable the coalition to win the largest number of seats, well, I believe that we should cajole the rest to join, because that's what they would want. But maybe they are not fully convinced that that is the way forward. Maybe they believe there is another way that you can have a majority in the National Assembly. But they're in a better position to answer that question.
I am Alajimani.
And because if we fail to address it in the public space, that this 65, somebody else will come and analyze it, and they will say that all the people in this coalition are a bunch of whatever. And definitely we will not want the coalition to be seen in such light. We compensate each other for our shortcomings in order to do the right thing. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, sir. I am Alajimani with the Standard newspaper. Mr. Sallah, my question is, it was never intended to treat the coalition like a political entity. Rather, it was planned as a temporary political arrangement to harness collective efforts for political change in the Gambia. Wouldn't you agree with me that contesting as a single political party will undermine our democracy and eventual return to single party rule in the Gambia? Thank you.
Well, what we have is not a single party. What we have are parties, 7 parties, with an independent political aspirant actually coming together. And the objective is to lay a level ground for multi-party contest. You know, that's the objective. We should not miss the objective. The objective is to empower all of them so that they can have a level ground for the next contest. One would believe that tactically it is an instrument that will strengthen multi-party democracy rather than weaken it. From the perspective that I have, it's like everybody is being empowered. They will share the radio, they will share the television. It's no longer winner take all, and the candidates, having been an independent candidate, now an independent. So in a way, there is greater openness, and hopefully the end result would be a genuine multi-party system.
Thank you, Mr. Tola. My name is Pamul Park from the Third Umbrella. I have 2 questions. One, I think the objective of the coalition might be some of the parties is to come up with a coalition independent candidates, but 2 parties have not yet agreed. Still, as you mentioned, negotiations are going on. And considering the fact that you want to come up with a lot of reforms when you got the majority in parliament, but you have to also understand that there are independent candidates that are aspiring, and what happens if they win, and what happens if the 2 parties that have not agreed also wins? Would this not hinder the reforms that the coalitions want to make? That is my question. Thank you, sir.
Yes, what we must do is not to assume that those people who will be elected will not support the reforms. I believe what we are trying to do is to be doubly sure that the coalition agenda, its manifesto, is actually backed fully. And that assurance is given when your own coalition members have the majority in the National Assembly, absolute majority. But notwithstanding, there may be some other people elected in the National Assembly. And when that happens, you have to really engage in more discussion and dialogue in order to build consensus around certain legislative issues. And there is no doubt that the maturity is being built to be able to also do that where you have a hostile environment as far as other candidates being selected who are not coalition candidates. But the issue now is not looking at the division. It is more looking at the tactic of how to win. I believe that should be the focus, that the debate as to whether coalition independent is more what is the best mechanism that could be utilized to guarantee greater success. That is really the issue.
Okay, supplementary to that, what about, it's a tactical move that has been made, but it's a societal tactical move. What about if it fails? What next? Because, you know, it's just like you're going to a war. You know, you have to prepare well when you're going to a battlefield. But what about if you have not gone with, you have not taken the right ammunition and just, you know, trying to say that I'm preparing myself for the weapons. And if you don't go that weapon, because it's a tactical move. It could work, it may not work. So what next?
Yes, the question is, what is the right ammunition?
That has to be put in place.
Yeah, I said,
the right ammunition has to be put in place.
Yes, I'm saying as far as the coalition is concerned, coalition independence seems to be the right ammunition because that is the one that devastated the most powerful. Yeah, I should not be. I will not go to that level. I'm saying that. Well, it was that instrument that served the purpose for the presidency, and it is believed that that is the same instrument that could serve the National Assembly. So, as far as the coalition is concerned, that is its best instrument. That is its best ammunition. So, it is practice that will determine whether that is right or not. Unless you have suggestion of a better ammunition, and obviously we'll adopt that as quickly as possible.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I have a problem with all these missteps. You know, these are primary mistakes, constitutional mistakes that are simply unacceptable. I want to know, do we have fifth columns within the coalition, or these are just a bunch of men and women who do not know what they're doing?
Well, I think if you see the process, in terms of law, the Minister of Justice, opinion, is the principal legal advisor of the government. Well, I believe all of you know that that minister came from a mission in Arusha and accepted ministerial post. He had to go back to at least lay his handing over notes and prepare to come back. And within that interim, you know, anything can happen. You know, constitutions, you have to sit down and read them. Do you have real time? You know, that's why everybody must have a particular function. So I don't think missteps are necessarily a reflection of inability. But in some instances, it's just simply a lack of preparedness. And that is why all these efforts are being done to be able to at least accept. The important thing is to accept those missteps and remedy them. What is dangerous is to maintain them. Obviously, we cannot be judgmental until we see the long journey and see whether it continues or is abrogated at the right time. But every young government has a right to behave like a baby until your first altering steps are mastered and you behave like an agile young person. So I believe that we can be reasonable. We can, and that's how it is being treated, really. As he has asked the question of going to the media, etc. All these are means of getting Gambians to get adjusted to will precisely take that approach that nobody is immune to criticism and nobody is infallible. And I believe if we take that approach, we'll always be guided by facts and figures.
I am Abdullah Si from Press Radio. Mrs. Sallah, during your deliberations, you said the coalition is going to select candidates for the National Assembly election in various constituencies based on their electability and competence. My question is, what do you mean by electability, and how can the coalition determine one's electability and competence? What procedure are you going to use? The other issue is the memorandum of understanding that was signed by the coalition during the presidential campaign. Was the National Assembly election included? And finally, the president is a member of the UDP, and the UDP has reservations regarding the coalition, vis-a-vis the National Assembly election. What is the position of the president as a coalition president and a member of the UDP? Thank you.
Well, let's start with the first one. Maybe the question needs to be re-examined again. Is it true that the president is UDP when IEC cannot accept somebody to stand as a candidate unless that person resigns from a party? So in essence, the president had to resign from the UDP to stand as an independent candidate. So it will be inaccurate to say that the president is UDP. The origin is there. But essentially, what you must look at is practice as we move. Now, number two, it is important to bear in mind that the president won as a coalition presidential candidate. But in the process of interpreting the results, parties can make claims. I'm the majority, I'm not. Well, every party is entitled to claim what it added to the coalition. I believe that is the first phase. How do we interpret the coalition victory? The second question that you raise, we must look at the president as a coalition president supporting the coalition. He cannot support any other thing but coalition. Now, if others do something else, well, he cannot be hostile to those people. Those people are not asking for the president to give them his blessing. They are trying to get the blessing of their own support base. So the president here becomes immaterial as far as the issue is concerned. He is a coalition president, elected on a coalition ticket, and obviously if there are some fracasses in the coalition, essentially that should be restricted to those forces in the coalition who may not see eye to eye in that case. Now, going to the issue of electability, well, what you do is not imposing a blueprint or prescribing, a recipe. It is just simply trying to build consensus. Whenever you want to win an election, you build consensus among those who wish to stand, and obviously you will eventually discover who is more competent, who is more electable. That is a matter of consensus building. It's not something that you declare, it's something that you work on until there is agreement. So there is going to be maximum effort to bring people to come and agree on who could be the best choice. But you know that you cannot prevent anybody from standing again, even if he is not the coalition independent candidate. That person could still go and seek the mandate of the people. So this is just a process. It's not abrogating the democratic process or preventing the most electable from being elected. So it means that it's just a process of building up the coalition candidature, and thereafter, others who may have been left out could decide their own right on the Gambian law to stand for election if they so desire.
What about the memorandum?
The memorandum, when you say an alliance, you build up the alliance, but every element of the alliance must be negotiated on its specific time. If you want to negotiate everything, you may not even have an alliance in the first place. So you deal with the first aspect. What was most important, the demand of the Gambian people was for regime change. And that had to be addressed in the way it was addressed. Now is the ultimate objective of regime change. Have you changed for its sake, or are we changing for a particular purpose? And now is the National Assembly to see whether it will be able to accompany the presidency in order to effect the type of development that the people envisage. So I think that is okay. Assalamu alaikum. Amuntako.
Okay. Give us a minute so that these people can take their recorders.
Only one minute.
I want to ask you. No, right now I can.
One question.
No, listen.
Like she's in charge.
We are going to have it in the local language. Okay. Wolof and Mandinka.